Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about a deck that actually has already been nerfed. So you won't be able to play this to the full power that it used to be. That said, I think you can still make some modifications and still play with it. And it was nerfed for a very good reason, which is that last month there was the Three Kings challenge. You had to use 3 copies of a card in your deck at most. So normally in Shadow Era you can use 4 copies of a card. The challenge says now you can have a deck with only 3 copies per card. That made Aramia really good because Aramia has an ability that lets her basically pull something from the deck, and so you can guarantee that you always get what you want. And so this is the deck list that I settled on. Now, I don't want to spend too much time going over the deck list, as we'll go over some games too. But some things to call out here that I think are a little bit unusual is running 3 Diplomat instead of just 1 or 2. Now, this is just to counter, basically the counter to this deck, which is stuff like Braxnarian Soldier or Towering Brute. Layer Diplomat can work on a Brute that has not been damaged yet, which happens a lot. So it's very important to have it's also just a generally really good card. So I like it on 3. Now I run Warner instead of Skyra. I think Warner is superior to Skyra in most ways, mostly because its survivability goes way up once you give it all the other stats. We'll go over that in the games. Relinquish is an interesting choice. It won me some games, actually. I'm kind of happy with it because, again, I was looking, like, the deck is so strong, you can beat most decks that aren't prepared to fight it, but there are a couple of bad matchups, and one of them is Attachment Priests. So Relinquish is just a really nice card that kind of craps on Attachment Priests and can win you that matchup. And it'll just be so much easier. Normally, I sack this card in basically every other matchup. You don't really need to get rid of attachments on anything else because you have Hideout. I guess another thing that is unusual is Shadow Bolt. A lot of people don't run this in the Outlaw DMB Aramia version. Now, the way I see Shadow Bolt is it's just a way to gain 1 Shadow Energy for 4 and also like get rid of an ally. Because you are so Shadow Energy greedy, I think having Shadow Bolt is really helpful at times. Now, it is true that it is redundant with Deadman's Breach, and that's why the argument is maybe you don't need it. But just for that +1 Shadow Energy, I think it's worth playing. The rest of the deck, I think, it's relatively standard in terms of what people were running with Aramia. Some other cards you could consider are like the Last Harvest and stuff like that, but without further ado, I want to get into the games and kind of show why this deck was so strong and maybe why you might want to still run it, or maybe why you might not want to run it anymore after the nerfs. So, as I mentioned before, I played 100 games with this deck and had an 80% win rate with it. So, it's a very solid deck, and actually, I think it's even higher than that because I was playing for a while. I got a little bit tilted because I lost a couple games, and then I tried switching. So you can see I tried Lowest, I tried Lance, and other heroes like Baduru here in the middle of my run, and I think that was a big mistake. I think I should have just stayed with Aramia throughout the entire 100 games that I played, and I would have done better. Okay, so I played so many games with Aramia. Okay, I did actually play a bunch with Logan. I like Logan a lot, but he's very inconsistent on 3 copies max. Anyway, that's kind of besides the point. Okay, let's see if there's... really, it doesn't really matter what replay we watch, but... I just want to watch one where I pull off the Warner combo. So I'm trying to remember which one would have been good for that. Okay, yeah, we'll just watch this game where everything kind of comes together and we're just in the lead for the entire game basically, and obviously kind of that will showcase how this deck can be really strong. So in this matchup against Aladar, I think the key card is Delaval. That is the 4-cost ally there that has Shroud. So you can see here, this is one of the reasons why Dalton got nerfed to now. It says it will renew 2 resources when summoned. It's not free when summoned after you shuffle. That will prevent this opening where I summon both Caravan Smuggler and Dalton out on turn 2. Then on turn 3, I shuffle back the Dalton, replace it with something better, in this case, the Midnight Sentinel. It's just a really, really powerful combo that, you know, is totally luck-based because it relies on drawing into Caravan Smuggler and Dalton at the same time. So here, our opponent does what I think is smart, is using that Brimstone Devourer to get rid of the Midnight Sentinel, but like, if they had summoned any ally, it would have died. Anything that, I mean, I guess maybe if they had summoned Brimstone Devourer, maybe it could have lived, but Caravan Smuggler has Ambush, so it would have still taken a chunk of damage. Now, as Zaladar, I normally don't like hitting the hero with the hero power, but I can see the reason why you would do it here, just as a desperation move. But, yeah, you can see how if Delaval didn't have Shroud, Zaladar would have hit the Delaval. And that's why Delaval is so strong against Zaladar, and why I think it's just, yeah, an amazing card. Here, you know I'm ahead, so I've got the hideout set up. I'm not afraid of it being destroyed because Bludgeon is a turn 6 card, a 6-cost card. So I just go all in, summon out Dalton and the Masked Bandit just to get more pressure on my opponent there. So yeah, now I think, yeah, here we're just going to solidify our advantage, and this is why the hideout combo is really strong, is you can shuffle back your damaged allies. So Masked Bandit was damaged, and you could just shuffle it back, renew 2 resources, and bring it back up to, or play something else, and also draw cards with hideout. Oh yeah, I guess, I mean, so I do, just because they're new cards, I will kind of go over them really quickly. So, hideout, looks like it won't let me zoom in on these. Oops. Okay, hideout is going to be a card that lets you draw a card every time your deck is shuffled, and then you can target an outlaw you control, shuffle it into the deck, and renew 2 resources. Then that obviously is going to trigger the shuffle ability. You can only do that twice per turn, the draw card. Delaval is Shroud for 4 cost, a 2-attack, 6-health ally with Shroud, and also the ability you can pay a Shadow Energy, take a card from your hand, put it on top of your resource pile, then draw 1 card. Dalton is a 2-cost ally that costs nothing when your deck has been shuffled this turn, and it's 2-attack, 2-health, and Defender. And I guess, yeah, the nerfs are going to be to Dalton, which is, I already talked about that one. And then to Hideout, it's going to make it so that you can't draw while you control any any allies that are not outlaws. So in this situation, I have Alden on the field. That would mean that I'm not allowed to actually, because my Alden is on the field, I wouldn't be able to draw anymore from the Hideout until the Alden died or something. So I think both are fair nerfs. It's early to say whether it's going to kill the deck or not, but it is a pretty significant thing that is going to impact the, impact things. So here, I guess, I mean, I do have to worry about Bludgeon here, but I just decide to try and draw cards here because I felt low on card advantage, and I wanted to do something with my resources instead of doing nothing with my resources, so that's kind of why we do this. We draw into the Machete, and I decide to summon it over the Tome just to get rid of that Oral Battery, because actually that Oral Battery is going to make something like Bludgeon here, like, much worse for me. So, yeah, maybe I could have saved the Aramia ability for the Hideout, because I knew that Barbarian Bludgeon was coming, but yeah. Oh yeah, here I'm doing something sneaky. So Unstable Gateway, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a kind of an uncommon card. It says you can seek an ally that costs 2 or less, and then the turn after that you can seek an ally that's cost 3 or less. but the problem is you have to pay 1 shadow energy every time you do it. I seek Midnight Sentinel, which will give Alden ambush and let me attack through the bludgeon without taking any repercussions. Here, I just go ahead and attack with the Dalton just because of the fact that that will let me summon another Dalton. And I decide to be a little patient. You know, I don't have to rush out to use Pathfinder's Machete to attack the bludgeon. I think that could put me potentially in a bad spot, especially when Zaladar has healing and could maybe make a comeback. But I'm happy to do that with Delaval because Delaval, I have another copy in my hand. Here we get the Hideout combo with the Caravan Smuggler. This is really, really strong, just letting us draw more cards. And you can see how Dead Man's Breach is putting in a lot of work here by giving our allies haste. So here we can kill that cultist for without any issues, and just keep doing what we're doing. There, I decide to actually get rid of the bludgeon just because that way, it's no longer on the field, so he would have to summon another one to have that 2 damage kind of on board. Okay, I think I do summon Warner here. And that was the reason I was... Okay, so I do. So you're about to see one of the most insane combos that has ever been introduced to Shadow Era. So the combo is this. The combo is you play Dead Man's Breach, you shuffle the deck somehow, in this case Caravan Smuggler, and then I shuffled it back with Hideout to renew 2 resources. You play Dalton, and you have Delaval on the field, but that's kind of optional. Then you summon Warner for 6 resources. And so I wish I could zoom in on cards. I can't zoom in on the card, but what Warner does is he gains all the keywords of the allies on your board. So we have Delaval, which has Shroud. We have Dalton, which has Defender. And Dalton gained Ambush and Haste for this turn only because of Dead Man's Breach. So now Warner has Ambush, Haste, Defender, and Shroud. And it gains 1 attack for each of those. So it has base 2 attack, plus 4 attack. It's now a 6 attack, 7 health ally with Haste, Ambush, Defender, and Shroud. And myself included, the Defender is really easy to forget about. So you can't deal with it by attacking it unless your allies have Ambush. Because it has Defender. Anytime you try to attack it, you're going to take 6 counterattack damage. You can't use Mind Control or something because it has Shroud. And so the reason I like this so much over Skyra is Skyra becomes useless once it has like a crippling blow on it, or, you know, you could Mind Control it, which would suck. But Warner can pick up that Shroud, which is so helpful. And it also can't be dealt with by combat as easily because it gets Defender. And it has Haste on board. The Skyra combo can be a little bit hard. Yes, you can ready it, but it can be a little bit hard to manage. And especially because, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about Skyra because she's not even in this deck, but it's hard to pull that combo off, basically. So yeah, we didn't need to summon that to win the game, but Warner is basically what elevates this deck, I think, to the insane level that it is at. You know, without Warner, I don't think the deck is above maybe like the top tier level deck. But with Warner, you solve a lot of the deck's problems. And what I would say is the problem is the fact that you summon all these 2-cost allies, but 2-cost allies are generally easy to deal with, you know. You can supernova them, for example, or, you know, you've got a huge board of 2-cost allies, but they all have, you know, 3 health or 4 health. And so if your opponent also has, you know, a bunch of allies on their board, maybe they can kill a bunch of them or use some abilities. You know, Banebow can get rid of a lot of them, or Zaladar, too, can use his ability and ping, you know, and take out those weenies. So having access to the fatty means that you're not just a weenie rush deck, you're also a fatty deck. And there are very few decks in the game that can deal with both. You know, you have something like Baduru that excels at killing weenies, but then you drop Warner and all of a sudden it's very different because Baduru struggles against fatties. And a lot of those like kind of mid-rangey decks or very kind of fast decks really struggle against the fatty because they just don't have the tools to deal with it, especially when it gains and picks up Shroud. Okay, so I do want to watch more games. That one was a game where everything went right. We had first turn advantage. We kind of had the turn 2 combo. Then we found the Warner combo. So let's see. There are some other matchups. Okay. I'm trying to remember this game. Okay, actually, there was one game I did want to show off where, okay, I think it's this one, where we paired up against somebody who, well, they ran the counter to this deck because this deck is everywhere on the ladder, and we kind of played through it. So I just kind of want to do this to show off how strong this deck was. We're going against Elementalis, so I think here the game plan is we keep Deadman's Breach. Deadman's Breach is key. Now, as soon as Karash comes out, that is, pretty rough for us because Karash has, 3 health, and Karash says that it doesn't take damage unless it's 3 or more. So, at least from attacks. So yeah, I was hoping to draw into Hideout there. We didn't draw into it. Or actually, I wouldn't have been able to play it anyway. But it would have been nice to have Hideout there. Now, Grimghast is another way to counter this deck a little bit because it's going to reduce our attack by 1 each. And so what's going to happen is we're going to summon out a bunch of our allies with Deadman's Breach, and then they're going to be too weak. So, yeah. Now we can grab our Hideout, though, with Aramia. And this is part of why Hideout is so good with Aramia is guaranteeing the Hideout is just so strong. Okay, so this is just insane, right? So our opponent has the counter to this deck, but we have the Diplomat, so we summon the Diplomat, and then we're able to summon the Dalton, attack with the Dalton, shuffle it back, so now we're back at 4 resources, summon another Dalton, summon an Alden. So we summon 2 Daltons, an Alden, and a Diplomat on the same turn. That's 4 allies on 4 resources. We drew 2 cards. We also played the Deadman's Breach, and so now we're going to be able to kill that Grimghast from, a position that was really behind. So I think this is just an insane line that you have access to with this deck. Now, of course, our opponent here, is still, Elementalis, right? They can still buff up their allies. They still have Karash. Karash now having 4 health is really annoying, and that is going to be very good for them. So here we're just going to, not even bother attacking because, again, Karash is kind of immune to being damaged, basically. Here I go for the Unstable Gateway. I know that Alden is probably going to die anyway. Here comes the Brute. And here comes the Burning Hatred on the Brute to make it not targetable by Diplomat. So that is a huge problem for us because now we can't even search out Diplomat to deal with that. So the key here is just going to be to draw a ton and hope for the best. Okay, we play the Warner combo, actually. So the Warner combo is still good. Warner now has, one attack only because of Towering Brute on the turn it was summoned, but it is what it is. We can still hit that Brute with Warner. And here is where our opponent probably, maybe, just maybe they could kind of steal the game if they go face here. But what they forget about is that Warner has Defender. And so what's going to happen is he's going to lose the Karash. I think there maybe he might have wanted to hit face with both. But then he's kind of relying on drawing into, mind control. Okay, that was a big mistake because I just kind of forgot that I didn't play Shadow Ball before in this game. So yeah, I misplayed there, but it doesn't really matter in the end because I'm able to summon the Dalton, the Alden, and then summon the Masked Bandit again, so I can still clear his board. And now I feel very safe. If we get mind controlled, we can just play another Warner. There's nothing our opponent can really do here. We've just got total dominance of this game, And you can kind of see how Warner just kind of elevates this deck to like that other level where, you know, very few decks have an answer to Warner. I mean, the things you have to deal with Warner are very few. What I will say is there are counters, though. So one of the counters that I will kind of show is Priests. So you do have to worry about Tidal Wave. I think that's basically the main counter to this deck. You know, Supernova doesn't hit Warner that much because Warner has more than 5 health. But Tidal Wave can kill Warner. And the other thing Priests have is Focus Prayer. So if you're a Priest and you're playing this deck, all you really have to do is blow up the Hideout every time I play it, or the Aramia player plays Hideout. You just Focus Prayered it, and then you Tidal Wave once they make their big plays. And that's usually enough. I mean, you also have the King's Pride, which is really annoying because a lot of our allies are only 2 attacks, so you can basically prevent a lot of damage that way. And then if you have other sources of healing, that's going to be even more annoying to deal with. So I did have some Priest matchups that I was winning because I was I put in that what's the name for it? The attachment tech, basically. But normally this is a bad matchup. So yeah, this is a matchup that's bad that because of the tech we still won, but it is a bad matchup, which is any Priest deck. So in this matchup, we want the Warners. We need to keep all 3. So I'm not sacrificing the Warner because my plan is that I'm going to shuffle it back with Smuggler. Here, arguably, I could have played Masked Bandit. Okay, and I probably should have shuffled back Warner. I guess shuffling back Pathfinder's Machete is fine, though. But yeah, Strength of Conviction kills the Smuggler, and I would have been much better off playing Masked Bandit there, because if Masked Bandit lives, then I can at least do something with it. But yeah, it is what it is. We're just going to summon the Alden and hope for the best, you know. And so luckily, yeah, our Alden does live, so that's really nice. But it also means our opponent, you know, set up their draw and everything. Yeah, here, you know, I chose not to sacrifice because I like all of these cards. You know, something like Delaval is great value. So I don't want to give that up in the Priest matchup where value is really important. But yeah, so we do have to kill that Scholar, though, because that's going to just be recurring draw for our opponent there. And so, yeah, we just do this. This is kind of like I'm playing around Tidal Wave mostly. So that's kind of why I chose to go with the Pathfinder's Machete instead of going for all allies. You know, maybe I didn't have to play around it that much, but yeah, I just thought that I think when you're playing against Priests, you always have to be mindful of Tidal. And you just have to assume your opponent has it. And so, you know, one Alden isn't enough to Tidal over, but as soon as I start playing more allies, then maybe it is. So here we have this really annoying, you know, Priest deck. They're just running, you know, all the attachments. They're going to draw 2 cards off of this. Has Spirit of Devotion, so our opponent's going to draw from that too. Yeah, I decided to Shadow Bolt there and kill it with the weapon just because I wanted that Shadow Energy build up. Arguably, I could have used Relinquish there, but I ended up doing it here, I think. But, yeah, I could have done it there, I guess. But in this situation, I could have maybe killed it with the Shadow Bolt again, but I felt like it wasn't a good idea to do that. Okay, so we're going to Relinquish here. So Relinquish says you exile all of the attachments on an ally, and then you deal 2 plus X damage, where X is the number of attachments exiled. So we exiled 2 attachments, so we're going to basically get a Fireball here. It could have been for 5 damage if we did it last turn, but this is still good. Because what I really don't want is I don't want those attachments to return to his hand. And I also don't want Spirit of Devotion to trigger again to let him draw cards. Because I think we have him in a place where if he doesn't have attachments and allies in his hand right now, he's going to have a draw problem. So we use Relinquish. Okay, we actually hit the face because what we can do is kill it with the Masked Bandit from DMB, which basically just lets us deal a little bit more face damage. Okay, so another focus prayer. So you can see how this, in this matchup in particular, it really does kind of hurt you. It slows you down a lot to have the hideouts be destroyed every single turn. But yeah, our opponent, I think, has a little bit of a draw problem there. Devoted Knight into that was a problem. General of Eunaxio not searching because he has hero attachments already. So we can see how this is really such a blow to attachment priests because they're so combo-centric, right? So, they need the combos, and so what ends up happening is as soon as you use that Relinquish and you can clear their board of allies, now all of a sudden they need allies and attachments. And it can be really hard for an attachment priest to build that back up. So I was really happy with Relinquish there. I think without Relinquish, we have a situation where our opponent, maybe they can, do something and turn around this game. But without Relinquish, it's much harder. So there comes the tidal wave. He's kind of desperate now. He's only on talent health. And that just spells, good stuff for us. Okay, here I probably could have just sacrificed Dalton. That's probably what I should have done, but I guess I was still thinking, what if my opponent makes a comeback here? And I was really worried about that, so that's kind of why I didn't do that. Now, Unstable Gateway is really the main way to combo off with Warner, though. So Unstable Gateway gives you the shuffle, and it also searches your Dalton. So it just makes that combo so much easier to pull off. Here I'm just going to get cheeky to play the Alden first, then shuffle back the Caravan Smuggler just to eke out a little bit more damage. So that's kind of the line to go for. But here's the Dalton, and then here's the Warner, and that was kind of guaranteed once we had the Unstable Gateway there. So yeah, Unstable Gateway really helps with the Warner play. Yeah, now our opponent has Embers. Maybe if they also had that hero attachment that heals him, he could have, had more of a chance here. But yeah, not much he can do without the title. And even if he does title, we have more Warners in our hand. Okay, so yeah, we've kind of gone over like what happens when everything goes right. What happens when just in normal games, and what happens when you're in a bad matchup and your hideout keeps getting destroyed or whatever, and what happens when the opponent attacks really heavily for your deck, like we saw in the Elementalis game. So you can play through, decks that are bad matchups. Your bad matchup is still, I would say, like an unfair matchup. Maybe, maybe slightly disadvantaged against priests, but you can still win. And even if your opponent goes all in and, plays Towering Brute and Grimcast and Karash, you can still kind of play through it. So, I mean, I guess all I can really say about this deck is that it is really insane. And, yeah, I mean, like, any deck that wins you 80% of your games, especially when you're only running, 3 copies of every card, it kind of needed to be nerfed. So I totally understand and support the nerf. So now let's kind of talk about what you can do about this deck now that it's been nerfed. What can you do to still play it? So the first thing is probably you want to get rid of the Sentinels. You want to get rid of the Aldens because of the hideout nerf. Now, I would say you still probably want to play Warner. Let's see, I actually have a deck that I was kind of looking at on how to play it after the nerf. Okay. So yeah, you would probably get rid of the Aldens, maybe only run 2 Diplomats. I still really love Diplomat, but when it turns off your draw, that is a problem. It's not going to live very long, but it's still something you have to think about. The reason I'd remove Aldens is, I mean, Aldens is really, really nice, but I think what you can do is you can just run, you can run either South Road Mercenary or you can run West Road Beggar. And that's good. Or you can run this other ally. Shout out to BT Azrath for the idea. But this says all your other friendly outlaw allies have 1 attack. That's going to be really good. So it's basically Alden, but on a 4-cost ally, which obviously isn't going to curve as well. It kind of conflicts with Delaval, which I think you should run Delaval over Brigand Captain, but it is an option. Because they're outlaws, they're not going to be bad with the outlaw nerf, hideout nerf. I'd run more Bad Santa, maybe like 3 copies or 4 copies of Bad Santa, just because you're not going to be drawing as much with Hideout. And then I think you can just play the same deck, and honestly, you'll probably have a similar level of success. Obviously, the nerfs are going to hurt a lot. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. You're going to have probably a playable deck. Anywhere from playable to good is where I would put this. I don't think the nerfs are enough against the Warner variant. And the reason I say that is because Warner only needs you to summon Warner after you've played Dalton. So the line is still the same. Really, you can play the Dalton and then renew the resources and then play the Warner, and you're totally good. So it is going to suck in a lot of situations where, kind of like against Flameborn, the Elementalis, maybe you can't summon like multiple Daltons a turn as easily. But, you know, that's kind of reasonable to not be able to play Dalton when you have only 1 resource left or whatever. So, yeah, I think the deck will still be good after the nerfs. I don't know how good yet, but that is probably one of the most powerful decks Shadow Era has seen in a while, I think. And so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. And let me know what you think about the nerfs. Do you think they're going to kill the deck? Would you still play this? Or do you think the nerfs were too much? Yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.